All right, so we're just going to do that last example from the notes from yesterday. So it obviously went through most of the graphs of the equations, but we didn't get to this one. It says to graph the equation using the intercepts, the symmetry, and the additional points. So if I want to find the x-intercepts, I do what? Good. I'm going to make y 0. And then how would I get rid of a square root? Square both sides. So I get 0 equals x plus 2, and then x is going to equal negative 2. Then the y-intercept, I'm going to make x 0, so I get y equals the square root of 2. Now, square root 2 is obviously not a whole number. When you give it as an answer for your x-intercepts and your y-intercepts, so first of all, these are going to be in intercept form. It's going to look like this. When you give it on your quiz, you're going to keep it exact. So you would keep it as square root of 2. But in order to graph that, we're going to approximate it. So square root 2 would approximately be 1.4. Good, 1.4. And if you didn't have a calculator to cheat and look, how could you figure that out?
Using square root of 4.
You got to be in between two square roots, right? So two perfect squares, it would be in between square root 1 and square root 4, right? So this is going to be in between 1 and 2. You're going to approximate it because you will not have a calculator on the quiz, right? So if it's 1.4, 1.5, 1.3, it doesn't matter. They're all going to look the same on the graph, okay? When you give those answers on the lines, it's going to say x-intercept and a line, y-intercept and then a line. You're going to keep them exact, but then when you go to graph it, you're going to round it. Then we did the symmetry. So x-axis, y-axis, and origin. What do I do for x-axis? Good. Change the y to negative y. If I can simplify it, I do. I compare it to the original. It is not the same, nor has every term changed signs. So this fails the x-axis symmetry test. Y-axis, I change the x. I would simplify it if I could. There's nothing to simplify there. It also fails, so that does not have y-axis symmetry. And then the origin, I would get both. Switch the x and the y. It doesn't go back to the original. It's almost all the opposite, but that 2 didn't change, which means it also fails the origin test. Then I would graph based on what I already have. So I'm going to plot negative 2, 0, and then 0 and 1.4. We're going to estimate. Now I know there's no symmetry, which means nothing gets reflected underneath this. Like it's not going to look like this, because that would be y-axis or x-axis symmetry. It's not going to flip over the y-axis because there's no y-axis symmetry. So I know that it's not either of those shapes. If you remember square root graphs, what did they look like? The little arc, right? So like half a parabola turned on its side is technically what it is, but it's that little arc. So I'm pretty sure my graph is doing something like this, but I'm going to confirm it with additional points. So I'm going to plug in something to the left of what I got. If I plugged in something like negative 4, I'd get y equals the square root of negative 4 plus 2, and y equals the square root of negative 2. What is that?
That means it's not valid.
Good. It would be imaginary and I can't graph it. So that confirms nothing is going to the left of this point. Then I can plug in something to the right, like let's just say I plug in 2. Y would equal the square root of 2 plus 2. Y would equal square root 4, which is 2. So when x is 2, y is 2, and it confirms my overall shape. Your graph does not need to be perfect. So like when I'm grading this question on your quiz, I'm looking at, are your intercepts marked? Is your symmetry consistent? And if you need additional points, that's okay. Like 2 is not enough to plot. 3, okay. But that is, you don't need to plot like 7 points to make sure your graph is perfect. I don't need you to waste your time. Okay. 3 minimum, if you can draw from there though. Yeah. Questions on this one? The x and y intercepts on this one, the x-intercept, I make the y 0. You can either factor this to x plus 3 and x minus 3, or you can use even root. But it has to be plus and minus when you square root it. So you should have negative 3, 0 and positive 3, 0. Has to go in coordinate point form to get full credit. The y-intercept, I'm going to make my x 0. And I get -9. Most of you did that correctly. The mistakes were made either not putting it in coordinate point form or the plus and minus. So just be really careful. It would sting to lose credit on silly stuff like that. For the symmetry, your x-axis, y-axis, origin. So x-axis, I change the y. It only changes the y, so it's a no. The y-axis, I change the x. This changes the x to the third and the 10x, but not the y, so this is also a no. And then the origin, -y. -x to the third. Drew, it's picking up your entire conversation on the video, just so you know. Yeah. Now it's all opposite. So this is a yes. Okay, that one would be symmetric to the origin. Because all three of these change. So some of you forgot to put the negative on the 10.
Oh, I did that.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right, this one, to get your intercepts, I would set 0 equal to, I would rearrange this so that it is in order and easily factored. And then split and solve. And I get x equals 5 and x equals -1. And then the y-intercept, I would have made those x's 0. And I get y equals -5. So 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, -1, 0, 5. Now I know it's a parabola, so my shape should do something like this. Honestly, for the quiz at this point, that's enough for me. We're going to spend lots of time on quadratics later where we'll get a little bit more accurate. But if you have 3 points and you know what makes that curve, it's fine. If you're unsure and you plot a point from in here, it actually comes much further down, which is also fine, okay? It can go off your graph. This one has none of the symmetry. If I plug in just the y is negative, it only changes one thing. The x goes back to the original on one x, but not the other. And then origin, that -5 messes up that origin. Yeah.
If we know it's not symmetrical, we fix the graph, but we still have to do all the work.
So the question itself is literally going to ask you if it's symmetric, and I'm looking for the work on those. So to get credit for that question, yeah. Okay, on the quiz, I gave you a little graph like that, just really for your own reference for when you get your quiz back. So you're just drawing an approximation of the graph. It's worth no points, okay? But it's kind of better if I give you back your quiz and you have no idea why you got an answer you got. That's kind of like, what was that graph that I used? That's how you would know, okay? It's worth no points, so don't stress out about it. It would be an approximation. If I want to find the x values when y is 0, that's the same thing as saying x-intercepts. That's the same thing as saying zeros. So I would go to my graph. Make this a little bit bigger, okay? On this graph, first of all, my y equals look like this, okay? When you lead with a negative, it cannot be this negative. It has to be this negative. Your calculator will give you an error when you lead with a negative. Then when you graph it, just from looking at this, I know there are 2 zeros. I got to find both. So I'm going to go second, trace, and I'm going to go to 0, which is 2. And I can go to the one on the left first. It's asking me to go left of whatever I want to find. So I'm all the way to the right. You can see my y changing. I'm going to go left of it. Left, left, left. That is left of it. Hit enter. Go right of it. That's right of it. I hit enter. And then guess, I hit enter. And there's my first coordinate point. Now notice that my x is -1.26. The quiz is going to tell you to round to the nearest tenth. That would be -1.3. This is actually in scientific notation. 1.3 e to the -12 is like 1.3 times 10 to the -12th, which means there are 12 zeros on the front of this sucker, which is why it's pretty much 0, okay? It's just that that's as close as it can get. If that happens, do not panic. That's what that means. It means 0. If it's a -12, it means there's zeros in front. If it was a +12, it means there's zeros at the end, okay? Now I want to go to the next one. I'm going to go second trace. I'm going to go to 0 again. This time I want to go to the 0 on the right. So I'm going left of it. Literally any of those points are left of it. That would have been fine before as long as I got past the other one up here. Then I go to the right of it. And then I hit guess and it's going to take me back to that 0. This time it's 0.89 or 0.9. Okay, we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Questions on the zeros. All right, then I got to find the value. Second trace gets me back to my menu. I'm going to go to value, and I asked you to give me the value, and X is 3.8. So I type in 3.8, and I hit enter. And the Y there is negative 1,037.3. Those answers are just the other number, not a coordinate point. So this was negative 1 point, what was it, 3? Thank you. And 0.9. And then this one is negative 1,037.3. You'll leave it just like that. Don't give it to me in coordinate point form, okay? That's the value of X when Y is 0, and that's the value of Y when X is 3.8. Yeah.
You won't ask, like, what's the value of X when Y is...
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Dean.
Will we get, like, points off if we put it in the
like, honestly, I might go gentle this time, but that would get points off on your AP. So it's something you got to start being careful of. Intercepts have to be in coordinate points, and they'll take it off. And values have to be listed, or they'll take it off. Okay? So, I mean, tomorrow's our first day of assessment. I might go a little bit easier. Okay? But other than that, I'm going to start being as strict as they would be with you. Okay? This is your quiz review. It is on Canvas. The solutions are also there. Okay? I don't want it. If I give you all the worked out answers, I don't want to even pretend like I'm grading yours. Okay? If you don't do this, the punishment is going to be the quiz grade that you get. So hopefully that's enough to encourage you to do it. You need the distance formula, obviously, for 1 and 2. Your graph. The quiz review is on Canvas. Okay? It has, the beginning is your triangles. This is your distance formula. We need to know that x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. That none of these formulas are going to get given to you, okay? You need to know to simplify your square roots and then how to compare them. If 2 sides are the same, it's isosceles. 3 are the same, it's equilateral. If a squared plus b squared equals c squared, it's right. And remember, it could be both isosceles and right. It could be none of the above, okay? You will get points for finding the angles or finding the lengths of the sides and then the classification. I gave you a bunch of graphs here. There's 5 different types. You're only getting 1, but I wanted you to be prepared for all different kinds. So there's a y squared, an x to the third, an x squared, an absolute value, an x squared, and then there's even a circle on it, okay? Practice it. That last one is the circle. Then comes this circle. This is your standard form, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. You're going to have to graph that. You're going to have to find the equation. Remember, the center here is your midpoint formula. Then comes your scatter plot, and then comes the calculator work, which really, in reverse, is how you're getting this question. These are first on tomorrow's quiz. You'll start with the calculator. That way you can go back to it if you need the time at the end, okay? We will go over, these solutions are posted. I don't collect quiz review. I post all the solutions. I know you can copy it letter for letter if you wanted to, number by number. So it is for you to review. Tomorrow when you come into class, I'll answer questions and then you'll take it.